The first time I saw his truck sitting halfway on my lawn, I honestly thought it was an accident. The second time, I realized it wasn't. By the third weekend, I was standing in my kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, coffee in my hand, staring through the blinds while this man casually drove 2 tons of lifted black pickup straight across the edge of my yard like he paid property taxes on it too. And the crazy part is, he looked completely comfortable doing it, like it had already become routine. I live in a quiet neighborhood outside Franklin, Tennessee. One of those older suburban developments where every house kind of looks the same until you actually live there long enough to notice people's personalities leaking out into the details. Some people collect flags. Some people let their grass die every summer. Some people spend 10 grand turning their backyard into an outdoor kitchen nobody uses. Me, I took care of my lawn. Not because I was obsessed with appearances or trying to win neighborhood awards or any of that stuff. Honestly, after my divorce, the yard became therapy. Sounds dumb saying it out loud, but it's true. There's something about working on a piece of land with your own hands that quiets your head for a while. You edge the grass, fix a sprinkler head, pull weeds for an hour, and suddenly your brain isn't chewing on every bad memory you've been carrying around. The side yard especially mattered to me because I built most of it myself. I laid irrigation pipe over 3 straight weekends in July heat that felt like standing inside a dishwasher. Dug trenches by hand. Installed the timer box near the garage. Seeded Bermuda grass twice because the first batch got burned during a drought. By the time it finally came in thick and green, I was weirdly proud of it. Then came Wade. Wade Mercer moved in next door about 8 months after I bought the house. Mid-50s maybe, broad shoulders, Oakley sunglasses permanently sitting on top of his head like he was born wearing them. Drove a black lifted Silverado with tires so oversized they looked cartoonish. The kind of truck that somehow announces somebody's personality before they even get out of it. At first, he seemed normal enough. We did the standard suburban guy introduction out by the mailboxes. "Name's Wade," he said, sticking out a hand. "Hope you don't mind noise. I work on bikes in the garage." I laughed. "Long as you don't start a rock band, we're good." He smirked a little, but there was something cold behind it, like he was sizing people up all the time. A few weeks later, I noticed the tire marks. Deep grooves cut across the edge of my side lawn near the survey marker. At first I figured maybe a delivery truck clipped the curb. But then the next Saturday morning, same thing. Same angle. Same oversized tread pattern pressed into the wet grass. Then I finally saw it happen. I was grilling burgers on the back patio Friday evening when Wade swung wide, turning into his driveway. Instead of backing up like a normal human being, he cut hard across the corner of my property so he could straighten his truck faster. His rear tires rolled right over the edge of my lawn with this awful crunching sound that made my stomach tighten instantly. I walked over before he even killed the engine. "Hey man," I called out. "You just drove over my yard." He climbed out slow, sunglasses still on even though the sun was almost gone. "Barely touched it. You left ruts." He glanced down for maybe half a second then shrugged. "Grass grows back." That sentence sat in my head for days. Grass grows back. Like that solved everything. Like effort didn't matter. Like if something belonged to somebody else, damaging it suddenly became meaningless because technically nature could repair it eventually. I should have pushed harder right there. Part of me knows that now. But I grew up around men who avoided conflict unless fists were involved. And I wasn't trying to become the angry neighbor screaming about property lines 2 houses in a homeownership. So instead, I fixed it myself. Filled the ruts. Reseeded the patches. Reset the sprinkler heads his tire clipped. Cost me maybe $40 and a Saturday morning. Then he did it again. And again. Every Friday evening or Saturday morning, same move. Same lazy shortcut over my lawn to save himself maybe 6 seconds of steering. It became this bizarre little act of disrespect that kept repeating over and over until I started dreading weekends entirely. My friend Nate came over one Sunday to watch football and immediately noticed the tracks. "Dude," he said, crouching near the curb. "These are fresh." "Yep." "You talked to him?" "Twice." And I laughed without humor. Apparently grass grows back. Nate stood up shaking his head. Some people only stop when it costs them something. At the time, I didn't realize how right he was. And I definitely didn't realize my security cameras were about to turn a petty neighborhood annoyance into the most satisfying legal revenge I've ever experienced. The thing about being repeatedly disrespected by somebody is, eventually the actual damage stops being the part that bothers you most. It becomes the confidence behind it, the assumption that you won't do anything, that they can inconvenience you over and over, right in front of your face, and you'll just keep absorbing it, because keeping the peace feels easier than making a scene. That's where I was mentally by the middle of October. Every weekend, same tracks, same torn-up edge of lawn near the curb. Some mornings I'd walk outside with my coffee and just stand there staring at the tire marks like they personally insulted me. And honestly, they kind of had. One Saturday, I caught Wade outside washing his truck while classic rock blasted from his garage. I walked over trying one last time to handle it like adults. "Hey," I said calmly, "can you stop cutting across the lawn?" He kept spraying the wheel rim without even looking up. "You're still on this?" "Yeah, because you're still doing it." He finally turned toward me, water dripping off the hose. "Buddy, your yard sits on a corner. Everybody cuts corners. Not through somebody else's property." He laughed then. Actually laughed. "You really measuring grass now?" That hit a nerve harder than it should have. Maybe because he said it loud enough for his teenage son to hear from the driveway. Kid looked embarrassed immediately, which somehow made it worse. I took a breath and said, "I'm asking respectfully." "And I'm telling you," he replied, tossing the hose aside. "It ain't that serious." That was the moment something changed in me. Not rage exactly, just clarity. Because some people hear kindness as weakness. They interpret patience as permission. And the second I realized Wade genuinely believed I'd never escalate this beyond awkward conversations, the whole situation became very simple. That afternoon, I stopped repairing the lawn. Instead, I started documenting everything. Now, luckily, I already had 2 weatherproof security cameras mounted under the eaves above my garage. Originally, I bought them after somebody broke into cars down the street a year earlier. They covered most of the driveway and part of the side yard. Turns out, they covered exactly enough. The next Friday evening around 7:12 p.m., Wade's truck rolled across the corner again. Perfect angle. Crystal clear footage. His license plate visible the entire turn. Rear tires digging into the soft edge of the Bermuda grass after a light rain. I watched the clip 3 times that night. Then I grabbed a tape measure and flashlight and walked outside. I measured the rut depth. Took photos from 4 angles. Documented the damaged square footage. Even photographed the survey marker sitting 3 feet from the tire track so there'd be zero argument about property lines later. It sounds obsessive when I describe it now, but honestly, once I started, it became weirdly satisfying. Like I was finally shifting from frustration into control. Monday morning during lunch break, I looked up Tennessee property damage statutes. That opened a very interesting rabbit hole. Turns out the threshold for small civil claims was surprisingly low. You didn't need catastrophic destruction. You just needed documentation, repair estimates, and evidence showing repeated negligent damage. Well, I had evidence. Plenty of it. So I did something Wade absolutely never expected me to do. I created an invoice. Nothing dramatic. No threats. No yelling. Just cold paperwork. Incident date, October 14th. Property damage, turf compression and irrigation disturbance. Repair estimate, $52.40. Attached, photographs, timestamped footage stills. Replacement sod pricing from a local landscaping supplier. Estimated labor. I printed everything neatly, slid it into a manila envelope, and sent it certified mail requiring signature confirmation. And then I waited. 3 days later, tracking confirmed delivery. No response. No apology. No knock on my door. Then Friday came again. I remember actually sitting in my living room that evening watching through the blinds like some retired FBI agent running surveillance on a suburban war zone. Around 6:48 p.m., here came the Silverado turning white again. Crunch. Right over the lawn. I almost smiled. Because now it wasn't accidental anymore. Now it was documented repeated behavior after formal notice. That changed everything. Invoice number 2 went out Monday morning. Then number 3. By week 4, I had developed a full system. Every incident got a digital folder. Video clip. Photos. Measurements. Cost estimates adjusted for inflation and material pricing. I even included irrigation inspection costs after one tire partially crushed a sprinkler head near the curb. Wade still ignored everything, which honestly amazed me. Most people would have stopped immediately after receiving certified legal notices. But Wade seemed physically incapable of admitting somebody else had boundaries he needed to respect. It wasn't about the lawn anymore. It had become ego. And ego makes people stupid. Around incident number 6, things got personal. I came home from work one Tuesday and found my trash can tipped over near the curb. Garbage scattered halfway down the street. At first I thought wind got it until my older neighbor Mrs. Delaney walked over from across the road. "That truck-driving fool knocked it over," she said immediately. "Wade." She nodded. "Back too close pulling out. Didn't even stop to pick anything up." Then she lowered her voice. "You need to be careful with that man. He hates being embarrassed." That sentence stuck with me all evening, because suddenly I realized the invoices probably weren't just annoying him. They were humiliating him. Every certified envelope arriving at his house was proof somebody had officially documented his behavior. Somebody had created a paper trail. And men like Wade tend to panic when consequences become permanent. Sure enough, the following weekend escalated fast. Saturday morning around 8, I heard pounding on my front door hard enough to shake the frame. I opened it, and there stood Wade wearing work boots and a sleeveless gray shirt, jaw tight, breathing through his nose like he'd rehearsed being angry on the walkover. "You got a damn problem?" he snapped immediately. I leaned against the doorway. "Morning to you too." He held up one of the envelopes crumpled in his fist. "This lawyer crap stops now. It's not lawyer crap. It's documentation. For grass. For property damage." He stepped closer. "You seriously billing me $50 every time my tire touches your lawn?" I shrugged slightly. "Actually, the last one was $68. Sprinkler damage." His face turned red instantly. "You are out of your mind." And right there, I saw it. Not confidence. Not intimidation. Panic. Because deep down, Wade knew I was right. He knew the footage existed. He knew every incident was time-stamped. And most importantly, he knew he'd ignored multiple chances to stop. I stayed calm and said, "You could have ended this weeks ago by using your own driveway." For a second, I honestly thought he might shove me. His shoulders tightened, fingers flexing against the envelope. Instead, he leaned forward and muttered, "People around here already think you're a psycho." That one almost made me laugh. Because coming from a grown man screaming over documented lawn damage while standing on somebody else's porch at 8 in the morning, it felt a little ironic. So I said the one thing he absolutely didn't expect. "Good thing the cameras record audio too." Silence. Real silence. His eyes flicked upward toward the black dome camera mounted under my porch roof. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Wade looked uncertain. Not angry. Worried. He backed off my porch without another word, climbed into his truck, and peeled away hard enough to chirp the tires leaving the curb. I stood there for a minute listening to the engine fade down the street, and honestly, part of me thought that would finally be the end of it. I was wrong, because the next weekend, Wade crossed a line that turned this from petty neighborhood drama into something a judge would have absolutely loved hearing about. The following Friday, it rained almost all afternoon. Not heavy storm rain. Just that steady cold drizzle that turns grass soft and dark by sunset. The kind of weather where tire tracks don't just leave marks, they leave scars. I remember looking out the kitchen window around 7 that evening thinking, please don't do it again. Not because I was scared of the damage anymore. Honestly, by then the paperwork practically billed itself. I just wanted one weekend where this whole stupid feud didn't consume my brain. Then headlights swung around the corner. Wade's truck. And instead of taking the wide turn like before, he drove even farther onto my property than usual. Like dramatically farther. Rear tires nearly crossed the sprinkler line near the walkway. I actually whispered, "No way," standing there by myself. The truck fishtailed slightly in the mud before correcting into his driveway, leaving these massive trenches carved through the lawn like somebody dragged farm equipment across it. And that's when I understood something. He wasn't trying to save time anymore. He was trying to send a message. The problem was, he accidentally sent it to the worst possible audience. Because this time, my cameras caught everything in perfect clarity. The rain actually helped. Streetlights reflected off the wet grass, making every inch of damage visible on video like a crime scene documentary. I walked outside after he went in and just stared at the yard. The sprinkler head near the curb had snapped clean off. Mud pushed over the sidewalk. Tire ruts almost 4 inches deep running diagonally across the property line marker. Any normal person would have felt angry. What I felt was calm. Because once somebody stops pretending it was accidental, the situation becomes incredibly easy to prove. The next morning, I called a landscaping contractor named Eric, whose company handled commercial properties around town. Nice guy, older, no nonsense. He came out around noon, took one look at the yard, and whistled softly. Damn, he muttered. What did he hit this with, a tank? Close enough. Eric spent maybe 20 minutes measuring everything before handing me a formal repair estimate, just under $400 due to sod replacement, irrigation repair, soil leveling, and water runoff correction. That single incident nearly doubled Wade's total. And now I had professional third-party documentation. Monday morning, I organized the entire file. 14 incidents, 14 timestamps, 14 invoices, video evidence for every single one. Total damages, $642.17. I printed everything, added the landscaping estimate, included screenshots of certified mail confirmations from prior notices, and filed the paperwork with small claims court. Not because I desperately wanted the money. At that point, honestly, it had become about principle. About somebody finally hearing the word no and understanding it applied to them too. 3 days later, Wade showed up at my door again. But this version of Wade looked different. No yelling, no chest puffing, no fake confidence, just tired anger. He held the court notice in one hand and stared at me for a few seconds before speaking. You really filed? Yep. All this over grass. I folded my arms. No. Over disrespect. That landed harder than I expected. Because his expression changed immediately. Just for half a second, but enough. Like he knew exactly what I meant and hated that I'd said it out loud. He looked past me toward the living room where my laptop sat on the coffee table. You seriously got videos of all this? Without saying anything, I stepped aside and pointed toward the screen. He walked in slowly. And I'll be honest, that moment was deeply satisfying. Not because I enjoyed humiliating another person, but because for weeks this man had treated me like I was unreasonable for caring about my own property. He acted like documenting reality somehow made me crazy instead of him irresponsible. So I opened the folder. Incident 1. There was his truck crossing the lawn. Incident 2. Same thing. Incident 3. The sprinkler damage. Incident 4. Rain-soaked tire ruts. One clip after another after another. The room got quieter each time. By Incident 8, Wade stopped making excuses. By Incident 11, he stopped talking entirely. Then we reached the final clip. The deep mud trenches from the rainstorm. The footage looked brutal on screen. His truck sliding across the soaked lawn like he was intentionally plowing through it. Wade stared at the paused frame for a long time before finally muttering, "Damn." Not angry, not defensive, just defeated. I leaned back in the chair and said calmly, "You had 14 chances to stop." Silence again. Then he rubbed his face and asked quietly, "How much?" 642.17. Another pause. Then he nodded once. "I'll handle it." And that was it. No dramatic screaming match. No courtroom showdown. No neighborhood cheering section. Just two exhausted suburban men standing in a quiet living room surrounded by years of accumulated pride and stubbornness. 3 days later, I came home from work and found a plain white envelope sitting inside my mailbox. Cash. Every dollar. No note. No apology. Nothing. Honestly, the lack of apology bothered me for about 10 seconds before I realized something funny. The silence was the apology. Because from that day forward, Wade backed into his driveway perfectly every single time. Didn't touch my lawn once. Not even close. You could have measured the distance with a ruler. And weirdly enough, things became civil. Not friendly. Never friendly. But one evening a couple months later, we both ended up outside grabbing mail at the same time. Cold weather, Christmas lights up around the neighborhood. One of those quiet suburban nights where you can hear dogs barking 3 streets away. Wade looked over at me and said, "Grass held up pretty good after repairs." I almost laughed. "Yeah," I said. "Turns out if nobody drives over it, it grows fine." He smirked despite himself. And that was the closest thing to peace we ever had. Now here's the part people argue with me about whenever I tell this story. Half my friends think I overreacted. They say I could have just let it go. Maybe put up decorative rocks or a fence or something. Maybe. But honestly, I don't think this was ever really about grass. I think neighborhoods work because people agree, quietly, invisibly, to respect each other's boundaries. The second somebody decides their convenience matters more than your space, your time, or your effort, things start breaking down fast. Sometimes the only language certain people understand is consequences documented in writing. So tell me honestly, was I justified, or did I turn a petty situation into a legal obsession? And if somebody repeatedly ignored your property line after multiple warnings, how far would you have taken it? Let me know in the comments. Because trust me, after this whole mess, I started seeing my neighborhood very differently.